Welcome to this video, which I'm making as part of a concerted effort to stay awake in the dream. Teaching and learning being a singular action of mind, and of course you teach what it is that you want to learn. So I teach peace, or a path to peace, because that's what I want to learn, and that's what I want to remember on a daily basis, on a momentary basis, whilst I find myself seemingly in this world still, in this experience of physical nature, physical reality, which can be extremely overpowering and very confusing and all of these sorts of things. There's a big flutter in the trees, all the little birds. There's a giant eagle just went overhead. All the little birds that have been flying around me above me have just taken some shelter. Beautiful. So making this video because the world can be very strong in its convictions of its reality. And of course, until you have an experience of reality which is eternal and formless and reflects the nature of our being as spirit, then you only have faith to take it on spec that what I'm saying is true. And of course, my message is always going to be that there is no world, that the world that we seem to find ourselves in is an illusion of a world. It's a projection of the mind, not Dave mind here, seemingly the entity within it, although Dave mind is the receptor for the experience. But mind in denial as a whole, which is, if you want to call that, a part of the Christ mind, which has fallen asleep and believes that it is separate from everyone and everything else. And there are two levels to that. There's the dream in its entirety, and then an individual dream within the dream that anyone is capable of having for themselves, which on an individual basis, the greatest contribution that anyone can make is to awaken from their own individual dream, to recognize the nature of mind dreaming as a whole, and then of course through enlightenment to even go beyond that and recognize truth, which is formless. There is no trees or birds or anything like that. So I find that making these videos is helpful in keeping me here and now. Because as soon as I step out my front door and start to engage with the world at the shopping centre or in the workplace or any of those sorts of things, all that I am engaging with there, with the exception of joining in communication with those who are also awake, which in this time and space is very few in the year 2023, all that I'm engaging there with is the residuals of my own illusion, the residuals of my own dreaming. And residual or not, it still has all the power of mind in denial at its service and is very convincing in its presentation. And of course that presentation is always the endorsement of fear, fear-based ideology, fear-based thinking. And having made a decision long ago not to live in fear, I can tell you it takes some constancy of vigilance, constancy of effort to remain awake in the face of what seems to be presented day to day. And not wanting to deny, of course, that what is presented day to day is also helpful and useful in learning to stay awake by revealing to me my triggers, revealing to me my blocks to the presence of love's awareness within me, which transpires in relationships and is present in relationships, notwithstanding the superficial nature or the upfront face value nature of all human relationships to deny that. Love, as defined by human interpretation, is nothing more really than a series of electrical signals that are produced but when stimuli are projected and received in a similar pattern. And of course the chemicals that are produced from that interaction produce emotional responses that we associate with an idea of love. But of course real love is unconditional. It's the same. It doesn't go up or down or more or less for one person to another. It's exactly the same. It's the idea of Buddha love or Christ love or Krishna love. And I quote those teachers because they stood for that love which has no opposite. So I thought I might talk about the illusion, talk about the dream, because unless you know you are dreaming, you cannot awaken from it. Unless you know what the problem is that besets you, you cannot deal with it. And so it's helpful and in fact imperative to have an understanding of the nature of time and space being the dream, being an illusion, being not reality, not your reality, although I would encourage you to take it on board as real whilst you find yourself here, because it's a misuse of denial to simply walk around flipping it off. Oh, it's just a dream. Oh, it's not reality. Try saying that when you stub your toe, or when somebody seems to present you with a situation that upsets you, and all these sorts of things. So whilst it's not our reality, we treat it as real for a moment, so that we can indeed begin to learn how to apply the principles of our own internal processing to it whilst we find ourselves here. And that processing, of course, entails the study and application of a set of principles which, when applied to our thinking, helps to change the effects of the nature of the decisions that we have previously made regarding ourselves in the world, and brings to us a new opportunity or a new moment wherein we are given to see things differently. And if you are studying and using A Course in Miracles, which I would highly recommend if you have that book, and you can order it online. But if you're using that book, there is 365 lessons, one a day for every day of the year. And with the use of those lessons, with the application of the little section in each lesson where you look at your thinking honestly and you take responsibility for it through the use and application of the lesson, you may notice that things begin to change for you, that you have at first perhaps a series of ongoing confrontations with your old way of thinking, and are presented with the opportunity then to choose whether you want to continue on with that old thinking or make a new choice based on the idea that the world is an illusion, the world is a dream, and so proceed forward in your awakening towards the experience of your enlightenment, which is the release from the dream entirely. So the very simple particulars, I guess, I don't really know how to talk about some of this stuff so well, but the really simple way of looking at the idea that the world is a dream is to understand that reality is eternal, and that what's not eternal cannot be real. If reality, let's say God, is everything, right? If God is everything, all-encompassing forever, then there cannot be anything that is not God, right? If the attributes of God are that God is eternal, God is forever giving, God is formless, God is spirit, then the idea that form and temporary experience or temporary life must be impossible. Right? Now, impossible in reality, but seemingly possible in a dream, in exactly the same way that when I lay my vessel down at night for its rest and my mind goes into sleep, I have dreams of things that occur during the night, but of course when I wake up in the morning they were never real, they were only a dream, but they seemed very real whilst I was dreaming. And that's exactly the same as this: physical life, physical experience, birds, trees, clothes, bodies. And it's going to sound preposterous, of course, because we have no other reference for anything other than the dream. Everything here in the world represents the physical nature. And it's very solid and conclusive. Just as if I pick up this leaf, I can twist it and get the results of all my thoughts about the leaf. If I tear it, I know that it's going to tear, because my thoughts that I've had previously about leaves, which come from my memories, tell me that leaves are easy to tear into pieces, and all these sorts of things. And there's nothing that I can corroborate in my world that doesn't come from an experience based in memory and also in expectation of the future. So I'm constantly living in the past and in the future, and very, very rarely find myself in the total present, except for perhaps, and probably everyone can relate to this experience, when you're daydreaming in class when you're a small child and your teacher catches you and they shout at you in the classroom, and all of a sudden you snap to attention and you're right back in the here and the now again. Right? Now, that's almost the here and the now. The true here and the now is precedent of thought, precedent of awareness, and that's more a subject matter for that we've covered before, and we'll cover perhaps again in the idea of meditation, deep meditation, where we go beyond the nature of conscious thought, or slip back behind the nature of conscious thought. So what's not eternal isn't real. Therefore, what I find myself in is an experience of unreality appearing real, which is rooted in fear, false evidence appearing real. And within that, I have to take it on faith and make bold experiments with faith to come up with certain conclusions myself regarding the nature of the reality of Earth and the reality of this world and the reality of my experience, by beginning to put myself in the firing line of my own doubt about it, of my own willingness to change, of my own open-mindedness to have something occur that shows me that not only that the world is not real, but that I have a reality of which I'm a whole and equal part already, which seems to be running parallel to this one, but I just seem to be on the wrong track for a second, or on this alternate track for a second. And so I make experiments with my faith, and I have a lovely little story, and I'm glad it's my story. It's kind of a nice, heartwarming little story, but I remember when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'd been reading a lot of books, a lot of spiritual books that I would call spiritual, Paul Coelho, The Alchemist, and The Celestine Prophecy, I forget who wrote that, and fictional books of a fashion, but based in ideas of spiritual truth. Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach, and Illusions by Richard Bach also, and Dan Millman's book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and eventually on and on with more books until I got to A Course in Miracles. But in amongst all of that somewhere, and there were many more books that I don't remember, some you pick up and you put down and they're not part of your journey, but you resonate with the ones that are, and you'll find yourself drawn towards them. I remember thinking that I wanted proof, that I wanted to know that I wasn't living my right life. I remember thinking that there was something going on here. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew I had to discover it. I knew that that was my purpose, and that making money, going to work each day wasn't my purpose. It was just a way to feed the body and do all these things, which I'd been convinced was the way of things. And I remember I left my wallet and my car and everything at home one day, and I lived about a half-hour drive inland from the nearest town and the highway in a small place near Limpenwood in northern New South Wales, Australia. And I hitchhiked to the highway. I walked down to the end of my road and stuck my thumb out, and I started walking to town. And I wanted to go to Byron Bay and visit friends that I'd had there who were quite spiritual. That's when I thought I knew what spiritual was. And I had this overwhelming knowing that I would be fine. I had no money, no nothing. I just knew that I would be fine. And I hitchhiked. I got a lift in the back of a utility and hitchhiked into town. And from town, it was like a 15 minute walk out onto the highway. I think I just walked out onto the highway. And I stood under a very old mango tree on the edge of the highway, looking like death warmed up, really. I looked like someone that had just come out of a hippie festival. I had no shoes. I think I was probably wearing a cheesecloth shirt and a pair of very loose fisherman-style pants. That was pretty much what I wore, and I had dreadlocks of a sort. You can imagine what I looked like. I looked like someone that no one would probably really want to pick up. But in that area, in that neck of the woods, it's prolific with people who live alternative lifestyles, hippies and ferals and all of that kind of thing. And so the sight of me on the highway hitchhiking was not an uncommon sight. All sorts of people of colourful fashion would often hitchhike up and down the highway, really. But I stood there. It was a Friday. I think it was definitely a weekday. There wasn't much traffic. And in those days, you had to go up and over the mountain and down into Byron Bay to get there, which was about an hour and a half drive. And of course, today they've put a new highway straight through, which takes about 35-40 minutes to get there, very direct route. But so I'm standing there under this mango tree hitchhiking, and all these cars are going past, one every 10-15 minutes or so. Maybe more than that, I'm not sure, but not a great deal. And it was a very hot day. And I remember running in my mind through whatever books I'd read regarding taking leaps of faith. And after about 10 cars, I started to feel a bit despondent that no one would pick me up. But I guess I was in a very jubilant mood to be embarking upon an act of faith in such a manner, and I was looking forward to a receptive reception. I was looking forward to a jubilant reception by the particulars of my dreaming, and to be supported by it in faith, and it wasn't really happening. And so I went to the tree. I went to the mango tree, and I sat quietly for a moment under the mango tree whilst a few other cars went past. And I put my head down and my hands together and I prayed. And I remember asking something like, Father, I'm here. I'm wanting to take a leap of faith, and if I'm meant to get to Byron Bay please send somebody to pick me up, and take me there. And somehow in my mind I thought to myself that I'll just wait for 12 cars. If I don't get a ride by 12 cars, I'm not meant to go. Right? I'll take it as a sign. And so I went and stood back out on the road under the shade of the tree and put my thumb out, and 8 cars, 9 cars, 10 cars, 11 cars went by, and I started to have these little doom and gloom thoughts that, oh no, I have to go all the way home again. And I kicked myself in the pants for that. And I thought, no, faith is its own reward. That was always my thing. Faith is its own reward. And sure enough, the 12th car pulled in, and it was a white Mercedes convertible, very beautiful car with white leather seats, and a young couple, very yuppie or preppy kind of couple in the front, very professional, all dressed in white, the two of them. And I was kind of a little bit gobsmacked, and I got in the car and they said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to Byron Bay. And I proceeded to probably bludgeon them verbally with my little talk about my act of faith and how incredible it is that God sent me this beautiful car with these lovely people and took me all the way there. And that, I won't call it a coincidence, that happening was obviously, to me anyway, you might just say it was a coincidence, but to me it was obvious in its nature as answering my prayer, as being the answer to my prayer. And that was probably not the first, but it was one of a string of experiments that I made at that time in my life with faith, in trusting the universe to supply my needs as I perceived my needs at that time, but always accepting, of course, that perhaps my needs, if they weren't in alignment with the greater good, then I would let go of them. I would surrender what I thought my needs and my aspirations were in favor of whatever the universe was actually trying to present to me. And little by little, one experience in faith after another, I began to realize that I was supported by a higher power, even though I'd been praying, even though I had this kind of rudimentary want to believe, this rudimentary desire to believe. I was beginning to have little experiences, and my other major experience on Mount Warning one night was a real... I have to tell the story. I won't tell it now, but perhaps it's in my video list. But together, all of these things added up, and they forged in me this incredible passion to want to know the power that was supporting me, to want to have an experience of that power directly, not just to be witness to it through these incredible moments that would transpire through my faith. And of course, it wasn't until I was the age of 33, I think, that I had the experience of direct union with God and my enlightenment, which came very abruptly after the dark night of my soul 3 days later, which again, another story. But so I wanted to put this video out there primarily as a way of making a declaration of my certainty that the world is an illusion and that there is a better way, and also as an offering of hope, I guess, and an offering of my truth, that there's nothing special about my journey that's not in your journey. And since the what would you call it, the activation of my awakening, since the particulars of my spiritual journey have seamlessly taken over from my old temporal, my old worldly journey. I've met lots of people on the path who are at various stages of their own awakening process, making experiments with faith and reading A Course in Miracles and doing whatever their heart directs, feeling their heart space and following their heart, leading them forward to have encounters with other people and situations and events that are nutritious to the soul and beneficial to the spirit. And it's a beautiful thing. But prior to making that decision for myself to live my life in faith and to not live in fear, I didn't have really any of those experiences. All I had was this kind of niggling sensation that there was something wrong. There was something wrong with the world and I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't like the way it was. I didn't know it was like that, but I was determined to find a better way. I was determined to find an answer to the conundrum of my life experience. And I remember very vividly verbalizing and vocalizing that decision to go in search of a better way in a relationship with a girlfriend that I had in my mid-20s. Anya, her name was, very beautiful Polish lady, Polish girl, very beautiful physically and very caught up in the Maya, as I was at that time, in the illusion, as I was at that time. And the two of us kind of met together in our relationship in this place where neither of us really could understand the nature of our relationship, but we were both very torn by it and torn by the world and confronted by the lack of human warmth in the world and all that sort of thing. And I remember I had to leave her because the two of us had come together. We were like, we couldn't meet anywhere, and physically we could and all of that sort of thing. We could make a home together, but on another level we knew that there was no reason we couldn't be compatible, but there was a greater energetic at work. And I remember saying to her, I have to go. I packed everything in my car. I said, I have to go. I'm going to go and find whatever I can. I'm going to find a better way of life and I'll bring it to you. And I'll present it to you. And I did that after finding A Course in Miracles. I presented her with a copy of the Course. And of course, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. So it's not up to me to decide or to arbitrate how anyone takes on board A Course in Miracles. In fact, it says in the beginning something along the lines of, it's not up to you to decide the curriculum, but only how much you want to take at a given time. So my encouragement, of course, to anyone would always be, get into it. Read it as much as you can. Do those lessons and put your whole heart and soul into it. If you truly want something else for yourself in this world that will lead you not only beyond this world, but to a greater appreciation of life in general, as you transition from the human experience to the spheres beyond the bardo, etc. All right, I love you. I'll leave it there. I think that's enough for one morning. And this is my truth. My truth, there is no world. Nothing exists. You're not watching this now, and you're dreaming a dream. It's time to wake up. Peace.